Imagine this. 540 million years ago, life on Earth suddenly exploded. In just 20 to 50 million years, the blink of an eye in geological time, almost the entire diversity of animals we know today burst into existence out of largely empty oceans. Trilobites, Anomalocaris with its massive grasping claws, bizarre Opabinia, Hallucigenia, the first chordates, mollusks, and more. It was as if someone flipped a switch on evolution and turned it up to maximum. This event is known as the Cambrian Explosion, one of the most dramatic and mysterious moments in the entire history of life on our planet. How was this even possible? Why did nearly all major animal body plans appear so suddenly in such a short period of time? What triggered this evolutionary Big Bang? And how did it forever change life on Earth? In today's episode, we're diving deep into exactly that. Why life suddenly exploded with diversity, what incredible creatures emerged during this time, and the leading theories that still try to explain this mind-blowing phenomenon. It was in the deposits of the Cambrian period that the remains of the first chordates and arthropods, echinoderms, and mollusks began to appear in large quantities. This may be associated with a sharp increase in overall biodiversity and with the appearance in animals of a wide variety of mineralized structures such as shells and exoskeletons. Unlike soft organic tissues, these are much better preserved in the ground and give us the opportunity to study the wildlife of that time. It is this so-called skeletal revolution that is one of the most important signs of the Cambrian explosion. Of course, it began in the previous Ediacaran period. Among the first creatures to develop mineralized structures in their bodies were the cloudinids. These animals, which became extinct at the boundary between the Ediacaran and Cambrian periods, left us only strange formations in the form of cone-shaped funnels seemingly inserted into one another. What the cloudinid looked like during its lifetime is currently unknown. However, their skeletons are one of the main materials that make up all the reef formations on the planet. In the Cambrian, ecosystems that had never existed before began to form based on the new predatory-prey relationships for living nature. This provoked a new round of evolution. In addition to protective mechanisms, animals acquired a large number of various new organs. Eyes and even brains appeared at this time. Scientists are still debating what caused such a sharp evolutionary leap. The following options are considered as the main versions of events. 1. Genetic revolution. A number of scientists suggest that by this time, living organisms had acquired genes responsible for complex morphology. Thanks to them, animals were able to develop new organs, as well as grow external and internal skeletons of various types. 2. Increased oxygen concentration. As is known, free oxygen was absent in the earliest atmosphere of our planet. Everything released by various unicellular organisms through photosynthesis was used to oxidize substances with a high affinity for oxygen, such as iron. Only in certain places on the planet did peculiar oxygen oases exist. About 2.5 billion years ago, this process stopped, and free oxygen began to actively accumulate in the atmosphere. This allowed animals to start increasing in size and enabled evolution to move to a new level. Approximately at the boundary between the Ediacaran and Cambrian periods, the concentration of oxygen in water and air crossed a certain threshold, and biodiversity across the entire planet increased sharply. Animals gained an excess of energy, which allowed them to produce previously inaccessible substances such as collagen. 3. Evolutionary arms race. We have repeatedly talked about this phenomenon in various episodes of the Age of Dinosaurs channel. There is an opinion that the Cambrian explosion became another round of this race between predators and their prey. It was at this time that truly carnivorous animals, such as Anomalocaris, appeared everywhere. Of course, the division into conditional predators and herbivores occurred much earlier. But during the period in question, the diversity of both reached an unprecedented scale. Carnivorous animals acquired a wide variety of adaptations: claws, teeth, primitive grasping limbs, and mechanisms for high-speed swimming. In response, the conditional herbivores of the Cambrian period were forced to build up armor and invent new camouflage mechanisms. At the same time, in this confrontation, there is a certain bias toward the conditional prey rather than the predators. That is, protective adaptations developed more actively than attacking ones. Some scientists call this concept life against dinner. Its meaning is that in an unsuccessful attack attempt, the predator loses only its meal and can make a second attempt. But for its prey, its life is at stake. Therefore, defense mechanisms develop much more actively in the evolutionary sense. 4. Global warming. It is possible that another warming of the planet's climate created more favorable conditions for the development of life. All life forms successfully took advantage of the opportunity provided. 5. Snowball Earth. It is known that at the beginning of the Ediacaran period, the planet was under the influence of global glaciation, which is called the term Snowball Earth. Ice cover was then present even in equatorial zones. Some scientists associate the phenomenon of the Cambrian Explosion with the end of this ice age. The very first Cambrian life forms began to appear precisely in layers dated to the time of the beginning of planetary climate warming. In addition, at low temperatures, the concentration of oxygen in water actively increases. This could have become an additional factor that influenced the sharp evolutionary surge. 6. Development of sexual reproduction. Many years of studying the development of life on the planet have shown that over millions of years, creatures that do not use sexual reproduction practically do not change. Those creatures that reproduce sexually receive half of their genes from one parent and half from the other. This significantly increases the variability of body structure and body shape. It is possible that this very factor influenced such a sharp increase in the number of the most diverse life forms at the beginning of the Cambrian. 7. Increase in the size and diversity of plankton. It is believed that the total amount of plankton on Earth was comparable to the current level long before the Cambrian Explosion. But it was at this time that the bodies of these tiny creatures became significantly larger and new species appeared. Thanks to this, plankton began to be more actively included in the food chains of various ecosystems. It was also during this time that mesozooplankton appeared. This was medium-sized zooplankton, visible even to the naked eye. Its appearance further enriched the world ocean with oxygen. It is quite likely that all these factors, as well as many others, simultaneously influenced the process that we now call the Cambrian Explosion. At the time of the discovery of the Cambrian Explosion phenomenon, the term itself had long been used by scientists when studying the evolution of life. Earlier explosions had the Hainan and Ediacaran biotas. They were a conditional link between the first and rather primitive multicellular organisms and the more developed Cambrian fauna. However, it is currently almost impossible to reliably identify ancestors among earlier animals for the creatures that appeared in the Cambrian. For example, the remains of many Ediacaran animals are found in large numbers in Cambrian deposits. This means that earlier populations coexisted peacefully with species generated by the new evolutionary explosion for tens of millions of years. The first researcher to speak out about the Cambrian explosion was Roderick Murchison. While studying fossils from different geological layers, he discovered a sharp increase in the diversity and quantity of fossil remains of living organisms. While in the layers of earlier epochs there were many various unicellular organisms, approximately 550 million years ago, more complex and diverse life forms appeared. At all times, scientists tried to understand the reasons for this surge and search for transitional forms of living organisms. In 1914, the American paleontologist Charles Walcott even proposed introducing the concept of the Lapalian period. He suggested that this was the time when the ancestors of Cambrian animals lived, but due to the peculiarities of their structure or for other reasons, the remains of these creatures were not preserved in the geological layers. Scientific interest in the Cambrian explosion phenomenon intensified in the 1970s after the publication of works by a research group led by Harry Whittington. These researchers conducted a reanalysis of some fossils from the Burgess Shale. As a result, it was concluded that most of these remains belonged to creatures whose structure fundamentally differed from previously existing animals. For the general public, the world of the Cambrian explosion was opened by Stephen Gould's book Wonderful Life, published in 1989. Despite the fact that the author disagreed in many details with the research of the Whittington Group, he ultimately came to similar conclusions. All types of modern animals appeared suddenly at the beginning of the Cambrian period. At the same time, the majority of animals were not descendants of previous life forms. However, some researchers believe that such new forms began to appear already in the previous geological period. Such creatures include, for example, Kimberella, a protomollusk from the Ediacaran period. Some scientists still question the existence of the Cambrian explosion. They believe that in earlier times, species diversity was no less, but very few traces of these creatures were preserved. The reasons for this could be both their small size and the weak presence of animals with mineralized structures in their bodies. Regardless of this, in the form of the Cambrian explosion, modern science has a huge amount of material for studying and understanding the process of the development of life on our planet. Regardless of how and why so many fossil remains are contained in the deposits of that time, their study has allowed us to better understand many evolutionary processes. As a result of the Cambrian explosion, complex ecosystems were formed with the emergence of various food chains and relationships between predators and their prey. All modern ecosystems are based one way or another on the principles developed in nature at that time. Also in the Cambrian, new ecological niches were formed that were occupied by the life forms that appeared during that period. A large number of the most diverse predators appeared, which significantly accelerated the evolutionary arms race. This contributed to the evolutionary development of nature as a whole. The presence of a large number of complex organisms influenced the formation of a more stable biosphere. Living beings began to interact more actively with the environment and participate in the cycle of substances in nature. All this contributed to the improvement of living conditions on the planet. In the end, during the time of the Cambrian explosion, living organisms appeared that became the ancestors of all modern animals, including humans. The world of the Cambrian period gave rise to the development of the planet's biosphere, which led it to the form in which we live today. In conclusion of the episode, following tradition, we express our gratitude to the viewers who watched it to the end. If you want to learn more about other evolutionary explosions and extinctions, we recommend watching our previous episodes. You will also learn from them about the history of discovery and study of the most unusual prehistoric and modern animals, human evolution, and current environmental problems.